I was born in Farmingdale, New York. About 20 minutes drive from my hometown is 112 Ocean Avenue in Amityville. On November 13th, 1974, Ronald DeFeo Jr. was in that house and killed every member of his family with a shotgun. After his arrest, and I would assume a very thorough cleanup job, the house was put on sale and bought by the Lutz family, who reported insane paranormal activity while they lived there for almost a year. They eventually ran out of the house and told their story in a book called The Amityville Horror. And in 1979, we got a film adaptation of that story.
We keep the dog alive in the house of
The 1979 film sticks pretty faithfully to the reports that George and Kathy Lutz gave about their experience in the Amityville Horror house. They moved into the house with Kathy's 3 children. They got it at a bargain price, which I guess is what happens when the previous owner just snaps and kills everybody. But they started to notice unusual things pretty much immediately. A preacher who came to bless the house was cast out of it immediately, claiming to hear voices and basically being covered in flies. George woke up at 3:15 every morning and was constantly drawn to the family's boathouse. Kathy started to be able to recount the murders and dreamed about them every night.
No! 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 No!
But then things started taking a turn for the weirder. Swarms of flies started appearing on windows and doors. People around the house started getting injured. George's sanity started to become more and more unhinged, reflecting that of the original owner, and even ignoring his own family and hanging out at the bar that he used to go to.
Kid last year that killed his family. You know the house down by the river? Hey, you're the spitting image. So, bring another brew.
And this was not the weirdest thing that would happen in this house. Apparently, on one fateful night, everything came crashing down. George snapped and tried to attack his family with an axe. He finally snapped out of it, but the walls of the house itself started bleeding, and then the house started going crazy trying to get the family out. And to their credit, they finally listened to the voices in the house and left. They take a minute to come back for the dog, but they do eventually leave, and they just wanted out so badly, they never returned. Which makes this probably the only horror film I've talked about where this doesn't have a body count. Alright, I mean, there's no characters introduced in the movie that actually die. You know what I mean? Now, the movie's not exactly a retelling of the Lutz's account, and I'm not here to talk about whether or not the story makes sense, or it's factual, or any of it happened. There's tons of documentaries and conspiracy theories. The owners of the house were apparently witches. There's a lot to go through before you get a clear idea on whether or not this place is haunted. So, I'm just gonna get to the stuff in this film. And all you have to do is look at the house and say, that looks haunted. Accurate to the way that the house actually is in real life, the house itself has this incredibly eerie shape, almost like it's shaped like a jack-o'-lantern. It also is a huge property, especially for anybody who knows what Amityville looks like nowadays. A lot of the houses look exactly the same. They're your basic suburb structure, and this one has the distinction of not only looking the complete other direction, but it's got a huge yard and a boathouse. It's got a lot of room for ghosts to play around in. But speaking of which, I feel the need to say this. I know nothing about Long Island property values, especially for the 70s, but I live relatively close to Amityville, and I pay about $14,000 a year to rent a single apartment. These people were offered a house with 3 stories and a boat dock for $80,000. And I know this movie is supposed to be sort of a you get what you pay for kind of message, but I'm not gonna lie, for $80,000, I'd roll those dice.
Would you please leave that damn fire alone and listen to me?
I'm not going anywhere. You're the one that wanted a house. This is it, so just shut up.
The best part of this movie is definitely the house itself, but a close second would be the cast, because they do not half-ass this at all, and the entire focus of the horror in this movie is based on their reactions.
Ah! She was shot in the head!
The more and more horror movies I like, the more I grow to like Margot Kidder. I never really loved her in the Superman movies, but between this and Black Christmas, she definitely shows off some amazing facial expression. Like, you feel in the moment that you would have the same type of reactions that she does to basically seeing ghosts mess with her family and her new house. I don't know a lot about James Brolin, but I do think that he is a perfect fit for this role. You believe that he is just slowly getting more and more crazy with every passing second.
You bastard.
I like that guy. He's got a good look. Kind of like a 70s Josh Brolin type.
God damn it, this is my house!
And by the end of the film, he is completely detached, and you believe that it has built up to this moment where he finally attacks the family. For a minute.
Kathy?
Yeah, this movie is very build up, but not a lot of payoff. They bring up several times how evil the house is, how desecrated the land is, and how much it's tormenting the people inside, but nothing really happens. The closest we get to real terrifying imagery is the blood running down the walls, the collection of flies all over the place, and a random collection of glowing eyes with cheesy music behind it. On a first viewing, it has a terrible pacing problem. There are sections of the movie where absolutely nothing happens. None of the stuff with the priests that know the family actually lead to anything, except one priest getting struck blind, which I guess the ghosts can do.
I'm blind.
But a running theme in this movie that kind of bothered me is that the ghosts are always to blame for every minor inconvenience in the house. A window closed on that kid's hand. Clearly you're meant to believe that that is the work of the devil. That statue was in another room the other time. Ooh, ghosts. That guy lost a few $1,000s for the deposit money on his catering.
For the caterer, $1,500. I put it in his pocket.
All right, now the ghosts are just getting stupid. What do the ghosts need with $1,000? There's some other things that if you read the book probably make a little bit more sense, but since I didn't know the story, I was kind of in the dark about a lot of stuff.
Aren't you gonna come to bed?
In a minute. The fire went out. Kathy?
No, don't touch me! Leave me alone, please.
Everybody wanted to come over to welcome you to the neighborhood. It's all right, isn't it?
Throughout the entire movie, the Lutz's daughter is seen talking to an imaginary friend named Jody.
And does your friend Jody like sugar cookies too?
I don't think so.
No?
Jody's not only brought up as a force that is definitely in the room sitting in that chair, but is also vengeful, and the daughter definitely knows when it is disturbed.
George yelled at me.
Well, you should have opened the door.
Jody doesn't like George.
You get the feeling as you're watching this that this could lead to something cool. Jody could possibly be like Ron DeFeo's daughter. And then you finally see Jody and... What? It's a pig. Jody. Jody is a ghost pig. I don't care that this is from the original story. That is dumb. This movie has such a huge reputation behind it, and it's so influential, but I was wondering, like, was this any good in its own time? Because I'm not finding it scary at all. I mean, it was definitely a commercial success. It did extremely well, despite the fact it was an independent film. I think the biggest problem with this movie is that they wanted to make a 3-act film with a huge climax built up within the construct of this story. But the story's ending is boring. They see some scary stuff, but then they just leave, and nothing happens to them. And I cannot watch this without thinking of Eddie Murphy.
Why don't white people just leave the house when there's a ghost in the house? This is beautiful. We got a chandelier hanging up here, kids outside playing. It's a beautiful neighborhood. We ain't got nothing to worry. I really love them. This is really nice. Get out. Too bad we can't stay, baby.
Now, this is the first in a series of Amityville horror movies, so you might be asking yourself, why don't you look at the rest of them? I'm new to the series, and I wanted to start with the original and the classic and see how I felt about it. Secondly, some of the films are only adaptations in name. Some of them just have the Amityville name on it just for attention. The other one is because there are 24 adaptations of this story on film. And I'm sorry, but I'd like to sleep at some point this month.
I went into that house, and what I saw there was real. What I felt there was real. And what I heard there was real.
Now, the Amityville Horror House still stands, and it's in pretty good shape. They've changed the number of the house to try to avoid any unwanted attention, but people live in the house. It's a residential place. There was actually an open house a couple of years ago when they actually put the house up for sale, and that was the biggest mistake that they've ever made because it just attracted a whole bunch of loonies who wanted to see if the walls would bleed. I'm going to confess something here. I've never actually been to the house before I saw the movie. But I figured that because I was doing this video, I would stop by and at least take a look at it. I didn't film anything, I didn't take any pictures, but I wanted to see the house itself. And I had shown up for maybe 30 seconds before I had neighbors passing by and just staring daggers at me. It's not a tourist trap. There's no museum dedicated to it. It's not a landmark. It's just a house in a neighborhood where something horrible happened in the 70s. And I can understand that people are kind of sick to death of assholes like me just driving up and taking a look at the house. But that's the thing. Even if I didn't love the movie, I'm still drawn to the story of the Amityville Horror because the story of it outweighs any bad adaptations of it.
Find a well.
It's the passage to hell.
I'm going to have to pick up a copy of the book and find this whole story out, but as a movie, the 1979 film is just okay. The overall story of the Amityville Horror is a good one, and you'd think that it would make a great plot for a horror film, but at a certain point with this adaptation, they just kind of stop caring, and they want you to believe that every single thing in the house is caused by evil spirits, whether it makes sense or not. There's also a fair amount of cheesy situations, a lot of mugging to the camera and wild overreactions, but that being said, it's still an entertaining movie. I kind of got the same feeling about it that I did watching It Chapter 2. It's not bad, but it wasn't scary, and that kind of took a lot out of it. I do actually suggest that you watch this once, because it's been so influential, and so many people have parodied it and adapted it into other stories. And also, as a Long Islander, I felt the need to talk about something that's arguably our greatest urban legend. I just wish it had something in it other than a pig ghost. Next time, I was gonna do something else, but considering the fact that Sid Haig just passed, I think it's time we take a look at the movie that made Captain Spaulding a household name.
Did someone call me Snorra? Hooray, hooray, hooray!